As you open your Bible to 1 Samuel chapter number 14, I want to provide you with some chronological information as to where I think we're at with King Saul's war against the Philistines. It appears to me that right around 1037 BC, which would have been the 420th year since the Exodus, it was in the spring or possibly the summer of that year that the Israelis were worried about Nahash the Ammonite threatening them on their eastern border. So they came to Samuel, who was about 60 at this time, and said, "We want a king, just like all the other nations have." And so even though he doesn't really want to do it, at the command of God, Samuel goes out and anoints Saul the Benjamite as the sort of king that the Israelis want. Now that turns into a public inauguration ceremony right around, I think, the 7th month of that same year. So 1037 BC, in the beginning of the fall. The next spring, 1036, that's when Nahash attacks Jabesh-Gilead, and Saul goes and defends them, beats them soundly. And the Israelis immediately join the prophet Samuel at Gilgal in the Jordan Valley during the wheat harvest, and reaffirm that Saul is indeed the king they had wanted. So that's the first year of Saul's reign. In the second year, which would have started, I believe, in the 7th month of the year 1036, Saul appoints for himself some full-time military personnel. About 3,000 of them is what he starts with. And his intention seems to be to eradicate the Philistine presence inside Benjamin. And that does not go over well with the Philistines. So they bring their military, a huge force, off the plain of the Mediterranean, up into the center part of Israel, and then down to Michmash, which is where Saul had been doing his military operation. Now, he wasn't at Michmash anymore. By then, he was down at Gilgal again, trying to get his militia force together. He was supposed to wait 7 days for Samuel to come and act as the spiritual leader and offer a sacrifice on their behalf. But Saul jumped the gun, offered the sacrifice for himself, and got in trouble over it. But this helps us understand that Saul was already starting to go bad in the beginning of his second year, 1036 BC. Hardly any time on the throne at all. And Samuel told him at that time that God has someone else that will be a new king, someone that's after his own heart. But we now need to see how the fight with this invading Philistine force goes. When we dropped everything off yesterday, the army under Saul is at Gibeah and Gibeah, which is south of the ravine that Michmash is located on. Michmash is on the north of the ravine. Gibeah is on the south side of the ravine. Now, Saul doesn't have an awful lot of forces left because many of them defected, or not defected, but went AWOL once they saw how big this Philistine invading force was. And Saul is trying to figure out how best to carry out his military operation. Meanwhile, his heir, his oldest son, Jonathan, decides that what really needs to happen is that they should just trust God. So chapter 14 of 1 Samuel, verse number 1. One day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, so his lieutenant, his right-hand guy, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Now Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah in the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people that were with him were about 600 men, so not a bunch, including Ahiah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli. So one of the people with Saul on this day is a member of the priestly family, the son of the currently serving high priest. This Ahijah would be the grandson, actually the great-grandson of Eli, the priest of He Who Is at Shiloh, who we remember was not a very good priest and ended up dying by now it's been about 41 or 2 years since Eli's death. 21 or so years since Eli's death. This Ahiah was wearing an ephod. So he's kind of like functioning as the officiating priest, overseeing the troops as they get ready to go to war. And the people did not know that Jonathan was gone. So once again, we get this emphasized. Jonathan is acting on his own. Verse 41. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side and a rocky crag on the other side. The name of the one was Bozez, which has something to do about glistening white. And the name of the other was Sinnah, which has to do with being thorny. So Jonathan and his right-hand guy go to the place where there's two really difficult to ascend areas on either side of this ravine. And they're going to go across to the Philistine side. Verse 5. The one crag rose on the north in front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Gibeah. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of this uncircumcised. It may be that He Who Is will work for us, for nothing can hinder He Who Is from saving by many or by few." So take note of the faith of Jonathan. He is a man with a connection to God. He believes the sacred stories that God only needs to use those who are faithful, those who trust Him, to get great things done. So he says, "All right, guy, God can give us a victory today if we'll just trust Him. Let's go." His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that's in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you heart and soul." So this guy is also a faithful man. Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we're going to stand still in our place, and we're not going to go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we're going to go up, for He Who Is has given them into our hand, and this shall be a sign for us." Now, I like the way that he phrases this. He says, "All right, we're going to go down into the bottom of the ravine. When they spot us, if they say, 'Wait, we're going to come down to you,' we'll wait for them, and we'll take them on down in the bottom of the ravine. But if they say, 'Hey, you guys, come on up here,' then we're going to go up there, and we'll take them on up there because God will have given them into our hands. Verse 11. So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. Now, this is not the full army of the Philistines. This is the watch outpost that's keeping an eye on the ravine. Because the only way that the Israeli army can get to the Philistines is by crossing this ravine. So this group of Philistines is keeping an eye on that potential movement. They would also be able to see from here the encampment of Saul a couple of miles away over at Gibeah. And they'd be able to spot any movement that would be happening over there. And the Israelis, they've got outposts on the opposite side, kind of keeping track of stuff. All right, so Jonathan and his right-hand guy, they allow the Philistine outpost to